That should be good to go. Live we are. I'm just gonna check everyone that indeed the sound is working well. I see that some of you are connected. I see that the mic seems to be working here. If you're not hearing me, now's the moment to let me know before I start waffling for too long. So, waffling. There we go. Perfect. And it's quite clear as well. Welcome to this Q&A. So, if you don't know what this is, so I should be back full force. Again, so if you're here, feel free to chat with me and ask any questions you may have. I'm going to go over what we have discussed together over the last 6 days. If you have more questions, this is the moment where you can send them. And we will talk about various concepts at first together. If we have a bit of time left, we will go through some of the homework you have sent and the questions I have received either by email, on Instagram, or in the dedicated Telegram group. Yeah. So starting with, so we talked about a couple of things, and we're gonna cover the most pressing questions were about bailing and how we regress the bail so that we learn how to step the hand. So I want to talk about why we should step the hand, how we learn to do that when we don't feel strong enough to step the hand, how this feeds into the improver journey as well, and how this work around fear feeds into all the pillars of handstands. So we're going to start from not scratch, but take things from zero and build them up so that you have a good bird's eye view of what handstands can be, how we can deconstruct them, how we can train them accordingly. If you don't know who I am and you're just ending up on this channel, my name is Vincent, and this is the Handstand Academy channel. And I've been teaching handstands for a decade now, and this is what I do full time, right? So start with that. Handstands, we sometimes think that handstands are just about kicking up, like we saw our 10-year-old niece who does gymnastics, and we're like, hey, sure, how bad can it be? I do yoga myself, I do CrossFit, I do this, I do that. It can't be that bad. And so we kick up, we swing our legs up, and we realize it's a bit harder. Well, one, we're not 12 anymore. Two, we're not 30 kilos anymore. But also, it's a much more profound and deeper practice than it looks. Holding yourself in the air like this, I'm going to change the camera here, but holding yourself in the air like that and having the legs, float for a second and bail is completely different from being able to stick a straddle, a tuck, hold it 30 seconds with good shape. They're not the same thing. If I like to use this image, right, when I first meet someone in class, I say to them, if you go to Cirque du Soleil, there's one hand balancer there, and their whole job is to rehearse the same act over and over again because it's that hard. But it doesn't look that hard, but it's that hard, it's that deep, and therefore it is that rich. So we have to forget, as adult, we do this for a hobby for most of us. As adult learners, we want to step away from the idea that kicking up against the wall is going to get it, because it's much more complex than that. And my job is to make the complex simple so that you go, I see what I'm supposed to do here. And the problem is that there is a lot of complexity when it's not meant to be out there, and a lot of logical fallacies, as we have talked about during the course. Namely, someone learned to do the handstand, whatever that means for them. They kick up, and one day, they can float here. And they can bring their feet together when they do so. And let's say they're looking at their thumbs when they do that. So suddenly they come back there and they go, I just found the key to handstands. Look at your thumbs and you will get them. That's a logical fallacy. Just because you did that when you achieved your handstand doesn't mean it was required to do a handstand. Doesn't mean somebody else will use that cue to get there and will benefit from it either. So we have to separate the wheat from the chaff when it comes to handstands and understand the different components and understand what makes or breaks a handstand. And the different components are, well, we have 8 of them. Most importantly, so we could talk about the strength, we could talk about your body awareness, we could talk about all of 8 of them, but most importantly, we have the kick up, which is what we talked on day 2, how we get up there. We have alignment, which is the position of your body upside down. We obviously have balance, which is what you do once you have reached a handstand to be able to hold it for as long as possible. And we have what happens when you go from kicking up against the wall to kicking up in the middle of the room, and that is how we control fear, the elephant in the room. And we're gonna start, so this is the bird's eye view. Each of those components has subtopics. So when we talk about alignment, we can talk about the pelvic tilt, we can talk about the ribs, anteriorly and posteriorly tilting, we can talk about the degree of shoulder opening or closing, we can talk about the gaze, we can talk about the leg position. All that is part of alignment. So 8 boxes, drawers, and in each drawers you have different files. One very important file when it comes to the fear drawer is how to bail. And so this is where I would like us to start this class with, because this was a recurring question in the Telegram group. I am looking at a way to make myself as visible as possible. And as you can see, there's some nice Valentine's decorations here. I'm gonna try to not get murdered by the owners. Just place that here. And so, just to give a bit of context, in case you haven't seen the 101 tutorial I sent for this mini course called the Accelerator, again, I will put the link below, and this will be visible. Anyway, you will be able to go back to it in a few days, and I'm going to leave it there for a couple of days. Okay? And there's actually a couple of progressions. We eventually, the last progression is, I want to feel so confident in myself that I can kick up here with no wall behind me and trigger a bell if I go too far. So I'm going to go this way so they can see me. We kick up there, we go too far, and without having to think, we bail, which looks like a cartwheel. It doesn't have to be a pretty cartwheel. It has to be a trustworthy cartwheel, something that you know you can do on a Monday morning, dehydrated, tired, hungover from the previous day. You know, sleep deprived, you know it will happen. You don't want to have to think about this. Well, of course, as adults, this may be a lot to ask from the get-go. Unless you already have a background in capoeira, in gymnastics, even when you were a kid, it stays with you kind of, and then we don't have this fear of moving that hand. But when we learn as adults, we may have to deal with a lot of fear. And we have to teach ourselves that pattern, which again, we want to practice so well that it has to become automated at the wall. And the first progression that we saw together in the accelerator was you climb up chest to the wall, you put your keys down first, you climb up chest to the wall. And from here, we were saying we want to move a hand in front of us, move a leg, place it sideways, and then on the floor. This, when it comes to the lower body, is usually doable. We can regress it to a point where the legs are not as high up. They're here. We bring the leg sideways, and we go from this foot on the wall to this foot on the floor. And we're doing a baby cartwheel. And we're teaching ourselves to move from the wall onto the floor safely. This is actually progression 1. As you become more and more comfortable, and we talked about that, right? Chest to the wall. There's 2 things we have to pay attention to. How long we can hold ourselves, and how close to the wall we can be. There's a third thing as a coach I'm going to be paying attention to, which is how good of a technique you have as you place yourself right upside down. Once we can do this reasonably close to the wall, well, then we have to start wondering, how do I move this hand? Why does it matter? 2 main reasons. Let me bring you with me in the studio, beautiful studio, and show you a bit more. When we handstand, we kick up this way. This way is going to be called forward. The mistake that beginners make is that they think that they can kick up into a perfectly well-aligned position from where they will never have to bail, in where they will be able to push and balance and use their fingers and engage their core to stay for whatever amount of time they want to stay, and never have to face the danger of failing. But that's not quite true. You will fall. The art of handstand is the art of falling and fighting against the fall with your technique, which is a product of your alignment and your finger pushing. If you haven't heard this analogy before and you're not too sure what a handstand actually is, do it with me. Bring your feet together like so. Bring your heels off the floor and bring your head forward. Now pay attention to what your toes are doing to prevent you from falling. They're naturally pulsing on the floor to prevent you from crashing your nose down on the floor. That's what your fingers will do tomorrow upside down. And therefore, when you kick up, you want to be falling forward. So we have to face that part where we may go too far. And just like with taking a step here naturally, we have to teach ourselves to take a step with the hand naturally. At first, we can get away without it. We can kick up and use the lower body on its own to get sideways safely. Safely is the key word here. Whichever progression you're working on, you want to feel safe, safe, safe. Send that signal to your nervous system with which you are working. Which itself, the safer it feels, the more your body will allow you to go further and further, to fight longer and longer before you have to bail. So it's a constant dance, negotiation with yourself, what you feel comfortable in doing and what you don't feel comfortable in doing, to ensure that you're swimming with the current, that you're not trying to fight against your subconscious, so that you can progress as fast as possible. The problem with this bail, while it makes me feel safe, is that if I stick to that and I don't move the hands, it reduces how long I can fight for my handstand. So here, if I'm forbidden from moving the hands, I'm going to, let's say, in this charger shape, go that far, and now I have to bail, because if I don't, I am at risk of falling on my back. And I don't want that, because I want to feel safe, 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 safe. So this is where moving the hand becomes useful. And if you can already do that, moving the hand as late as possible becomes useful. There's plenty of progressions to spice things up. So here in my charger again, if I know I can take a step, I can move this foot further out to the point where I'm about to take that step, take the step, and bail. It widens the zone in which you can fight for a handstand, which itself will have two benefits. One, allowing you to fight longer once you develop enough confidence to do that in the middle of the room. And two, allow you to catch more handstands. Because suddenly, if you go a bit too far, you can still fight for your handstand. If you don't go as far, you can still fight for your handstand. You don't have to be in that smaller zone. You have a wider room for error. And that's what your handstand practice should be about. Knowing what is good, what works for you, what is right, what is wrong, and widening, making your handstand more and more forgiving, because your technique gets better and better. So that's for the that's for the logic of why we should move the hand. Now, if you cannot move the hand yet, don't worry. You have to stick to the leg climbing down, as we saw, either freestanding back to the wall or chest to the wall. And in a different scenario, teach yourself to move from one hand to the other. There's a couple of things that can be at play here. We usually blame strength. Usually strength is not the problem. It's more so a trust in our ability to hold ourselves upside down. Will my shoulder hold me if I suddenly move one hand off? And as long as we haven't proven to ourselves as adults who haven't done that in a while or ever, that this is actually safe, we may have a strong defense mechanism that prevents us from, for a split second, that prevents us from being on that arm and take a step with the other. Now, don't get me wrong, in theory, you are absolutely fine. You're not asked to handstand, and while being on both hands, lift one hand, still handstand there, and place it forward. Like the toddler moving forward, learning to walk, you're asked to lose balance and catch. Have you noticed that a toddler cannot stay still like that, let alone do this, but they definitely can do that? Same idea. They fall and catch, they fall and catch. So the strength you need to fall and catch your handstand is nowhere near what you think you may need, and is nowhere near being able to hold yourself on one arm in a handstand. But even though we understand that on paper, in theory, we do have to show it. We do have to show it to ourselves, to our brain, if you will. And the way you do that is, as we were saying, right, discussing, chest to the wall, you cannot lift that hand, is to use an elevated surface. So you're gonna find a chair, or a bed, or a couch, and the higher the better. You can make it higher as you get more and more comfortable. And unsurprisingly, you're gonna place your feet here, load your hands, that is, make your hands as heavy as possible, lean on one side, and try to make the other hand as light as possible. Come back to the center and do the same on the other side. And eventually, you will feel so strong here that you can maybe quickly raise one hand at a time, and eventually hold it for longer there, which gives you all the time necessary to bring the belly hand in front of the other, and then dismount. The higher the setup, and the closer to a handstand this will feel like, and the heavier usually it will be on your hands as well. That's how you build it up, and that's how you have to think your training overall. Don't try to fit in a box. Most templates out there, they're one size fits all. And so they show you the bail, and if you can't do it, too bad for you. They show you a chest to the wall takeoff, and if you're not brave enough to take off, too bad for you. You have to reverse engineer. So again, I had those questions in the group, and this is what you should do. Take the time to build that up, feet on the couch. Make your alignment heavier on the hands, lighter on the feet, by extending your legs or raising the support. And week by week, you'll get very close to being super comfortable on one arm, which is a super comfortable place to be in, to be able tomorrow to do the same while overshooting in order to dismount safely. So that's for our bail, and if you have any more questions about that, we will address them. I want us to talk as well about I'm just checking the messages here in the group, right? The body silence. This was something else that raised up during the week. And consistency. Plenty of things to talk about. So body silence is your capacity to lock your legs and your body in place once you have found your handstand. And it's super important. You're gonna work hard for the first couple of months in understanding what a good alignment and a bad alignment even mean. And again, plenty of contradicting advice out there. Remember, alignment is one of the many components we have, 8 components we have when we take an overview of handstands. One of the most essential though, which is how you're gonna place your body upside down. And once you've understood what it takes in terms of where you're gonna bring your shoulders, your pelvis, and your legs in space, to hold a handstand. Once you understand, like we were discussing together this week from day 2 onwards, that this in which my shoulders don't go far enough is not a thing, and it will never be a thing until you get to 45 seconds. It's an advanced shoulder placement, and therefore it's so advanced you shouldn't even go near it. It's super hard to hold. Place your shoulders properly. So that's one of the components we talked about, right? There's more. There's the pecs, there's the legs, there's many more. So week by week, you fine-tune your understanding of how you should place your body upside down to get a handstand. Why is it that this is a handstand, but this is not a handstand? It's not because my core is weak. It's not because my technique is shite. It's because mechanically one can be a handstand. And depending on how good you are at balancing, you will balance it more or less long. And the other can't, ever. Why is it that this is a handstand, but and my body's out overhead, but if I bring my legs here, it's not a handstand anymore? It's not because my balancing skills are poor. It's because my alignment is not a thing anymore. I have to practice that mindfully at the wall to understand what is a thing and what is not. And beyond that, I have to be able to step away from the one-size-fits-all approach to understand what is the thing for me and what is the thing for other bodies with other backgrounds, other levels of strength, other levels of flexibility. I had a friend who was learning handstands once, and he was like 6'5". Do you think he will be able to do the L shape that we see everywhere on social media with the legs completely horizontal as easily as a shorter person who has some background in yoga and is super flexible? The answer is no. And you have to be able to say, this is not, I understand the logic, but it's not for me. It's not easy at first because you're starting to navigate this world and you have to be able to exert some form of critical thinking without having all the knowledge at your disposal. But the logic is here. You want to be able to adapt what you see. And so what we're going to talk about right now, this idea of locking the legs in the air, fits in that category. The drawer alignment, we talk about your lower body, and we talk about securing this position. Before we do so, if this resonates, I do have to mention that this week, this mini course, which again, if you haven't seen it, I will put the link in the description at the end of the live, leads into a program if you want to join, which is what I do. But the last time I opened that, it was last October because time flies. It's an 8-week program in which we look at all 8 components together, and in which I teach you personally to see what works for you. And I've struggled to convey this because everyone seems to be saying, oh, I'm going to coach you and give you some reviews as a coach. To give you a WhatsApp group, I watch you, your handstands that you send me every week. And I tell you exactly on screen what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. And we learn to personalize your training according to a couple of things that are very much you. Your body, your schedule, your background, your goals, what clicks with you. Even if you have a twin brother, sister with whom you share those 4 things, what clicks with you may not be the same as them. Some people like to think about what to engage. Some people like to think about nothing. Some people like to think about specific cues. It's a detective game. It's a diagnostic game. We're trying to fine-tune the recipe that works for you. This is a coaching program. It's not self-paced. We work together week by week. So it starts at a specific date, and it starts this Wednesday. So I will put the link for that as well below. Spots are limited because I work with you individually, and if you're interested, you can check it out. Now, moving back to the idea of silence in your body. I will show you what I mean. This applies to the wall. Whether you are a beginner, which remember, a beginner works with the wall And their next goal is to be able to do something without the ball eventually. An improver can already do something without the ball, but they can't hold it consistently. Or they can't hold it for as long as they wish, or they're not as straight as they wish. And that's your work. Going back to the wall, refining things, bringing them back here. So I'm going to demonstrate this without the ball, but it also applies with the ball. And that is, we kick up into an alignment that could be a thing. Let's say this, but the legs keep moving, and they make you fall. This would have become 30 seconds. But the alignment, the recipe that you found, that you see because the body decelerates in the air before it falls. This is always the sign as a teacher that the person went through their alignment and then lost it. And the culprit here, in most cases, there's 3 scenarios, but in most scenarios, is a lack of control and body awareness, body isolation of our body. Together this week, we worked on stacking the shoulders. That was one way to work on that. But what we're going to talk about now is the lower body. We want, the moment the body stops moving in the air, we want to be able to lock those legs together. Because one of the most common things you're going to do is you're going to bend one of those legs, or one of these 2 legs is going to start having a life of its own and move where it shouldn't move and make you fall. So it looks like this. We have a handstand. You bend. Oh, game over. At that stage, game over. Or you have a handstand, and this leg here keeps moving towards this one. Game over. So we have to teach ourselves to lock the desired position. And for that, we have to teach ourselves what a desirable position is in the first place, which again is another rabbit hole. We won't go into details of that today, but let's talk about how we silence ourselves, how we silence our lower body rather, upside down. So bringing you back to the wall, and also talking about consistency in a second, to bounce back on the comment from Brit today in the group. You're gonna go chest to the wall, but if you're not comfortable, let me rewind here. As a beginner, working to get rid of the wall, you're gonna do this drill, back to the wall. That is, you're gonna kick up and get against the wall. As an improver, you're gonna do this drill, chest to the wall. So you're gonna climb up and go chest to the wall with nothing behind you. But if you're an improver, that should be okay because you have some form of bail. If you're not too sure, send me a text in the Telegram group. We're gonna get into a position, and I'm gonna show you both cases, yeah? The moment, and by default, we're gonna have this, but you're gonna apply the same for a feet together handstand or a pike, wherever it is. You're gonna lock that position on the wall, tethered to the wall for 3 good seconds, and then you're gonna start balancing. If you're not too sure about what that is, something to do with the fingers, very, very, very deep rabbit hole. Won't go into the details today. If you don't know what that is, and you have no clue, hold yourself there with as much body silence as possible. And we talked about the fact that we could think of the legs as being the branches of a tree. And I want the legs to have absolutely no wind blowing through the branches. So what we all tend to do until you have 15 seconds on demand is that the moment you have secured your handstand, however your tree looks like, you allow the wind to move it in the air, and one branch gets closer to the other, and this one starts moving towards the other, and you think it's fine because you're still upside down, but actually you already are digging the grave of your handstand. And the key for this to stop happening, for your consistency to go from 2 out of 10 to 8 out of 10, is to be very mindful of your alignment, especially when you finally found it. Remember, freestanding, what I showed you, when it's decelerates on its own, you have a thing. Don't sacrifice it. It's time to fight to keep what you worked so hard at figuring out. It's very frustrating in a good way. As a coach, I see it and I'm like, okay, nice. You can do much more than you can because you're going through your handstand. You're that close to tripling how long you can hold it. You have to recognize that you're going there. You're getting it, but you're losing it. So how does it look like? We kick up against the wall. I move here so you can see a bit more of me. And we're there. We're gonna try to take off. And I want your legs, the branches, to stay as still as possible off the wall. Meaning if they start doing this, if this one starts traveling towards the other, if this one starts traveling towards the other, well, that's the wind I'm talking about. It looks like nothing. But if you allow this to happen, when it's time to take this freestanding, you will have allowed a bad habit to get ingrained in the way you handstand. And then you will surprise yourself in saying, I don't understand why I can only hold it every so often, for 5 seconds max. Well, the reason is you have allowed a pattern, a bad habit, if you want to call it this way, to nest itself in the way you practice. So I'm warning you already against that. Beginners, back to the wall. The moment you can reach the wall consistently, which you don't have to, by the way, which we can work on in many, many ways. But by the time you can reach the wall at least one every other time, this becomes one of your most important priorities. And as I was saying, you can do the same without even leaving the wall, right? A very common problem in the way people practice is that they think that the more they're off the wall, the better. That's couldn't be further from the truth. I would rather, I can tell you this. The person who practices like this, kicking up against the wall and staying there and feeling the movement of these legs, the micro movement, the micro weight shifts between the foot and the hands, and hold this with pure body awareness for 20 seconds, will progress 5 times as fast as the person who kicks up exactly the same, and once they've reached the wall, they take off like that. And they hold it for 3 seconds, and they come back down, and they're like, wow, this was a great handstand, wasn't it? But I don't know why I can't break through the 2-second ceiling. Because we're not being body aware here. So you're propelling yourself off the wall, enjoying 2 seconds of float, not understanding how it happened and what you should do to be able to go beyond it, not feeling the fluctuations that naturally happen, not trying to lock any alignment in space. We're just throwing ourselves at the wall. The very thing we started this live with, the very thing we want to avoid doing in the future. Okay? You shouldn't do handstands to impress anyone. The less impressive it looks, the more you are fine-tuning the sensations that will help you achieve your goals, whether it is to hold a handstand on demand, or to float in your yoga transitions, or to walk on your hands, or to get 30 seconds, 60 seconds, the press, the shape shift, all that. A hell of a lot more of body awareness and inside-looking drills than you think. Now, that was for the philosophical part of handstands. Chest to the wall for the improvers, same idea, and actually quite noticeably spicier. We're gonna, but for argument's sake, we're gonna go back to our V shape here. So you can see my foot, can you not? There. We take one foot off, and I want to pay, when I'm about to take off, pay attention to this foot. Make sure that the moment you take off, it hovers off the wall instead of traveling towards the other foot and making you fall. Because this is one of the most recurring mistakes we make as improvers. Intermediates, little note for you, if there is any one of you in the room, a bit of water. You can do the exact same drill, and you should. In pikes, so you're working on your pikes. You have your 15-second handstand and beyond. You're working on conquering more shapes, including the pikes, so the tuck and the straddle and all that. And usually at that stage, we're like, oh yeah, but I got so good in handstands, I just need to freestand more. And then I'm surprised at the fact that I'm not progressing as fast as before. But because you're not using the wall anymore, because you're like, I had enough of this. No, go back to the wall. Come back to the wall and do the thing. You don't have to do much of it. But trust me, that's so just for those of you who are at that stage, that's the number one mistake I see every week, right? I teach every day, 6 days a week. I can tell you that. The beginners don't do enough of the middle of the room and scary thing. We have to be gradual. We have to be individualized in the way we do that. The improvers don't do enough back and forth between the wall and the middle of the room. And they also never celebrate their successes. The intermediates don't use the wall anymore, and they should. So I'm going to show you one variation in case that's you. And if that's not you yet, to understand how useful this is. This is not a trick. This is one of those body awareness drills I was mentioning before. In a straddle, you go chest to the wall. Now, can I do that so that you can see me though, without destroying the decorations? You're gonna go in a straddle like so, feet on the wall. You're gonna pike. Your feet will take off the wall, and you're gonna make those feet hover off the wall. The reason why you fall out of your straddles, out of your pikes, which are hard to hold positions or to feel rather positions, usually actually easier to hold, is you're not applying the same rigid or demanding standards on your pikes as you used to do for your normal handstand. So it looks like this hovering drill, body silence drill applied to the intermediate shape that a straddle can be. Cup or chest to the wall. Making sure we're safe here, making sure you kind of see something. I need to pike and keep the feet pointing towards the wall as I do so. Because the number one mistake people make is this. They allow the feet to gently travel away from the wall, and that makes them fall freestanding. This is where you teach yourself to stop doing that. Does that make sense? So, we talked about bailing. We talked about body silence and alignment. We're going to finish this with consistency. And this is more going to be about how we train and how we want to think about handstands. So I don't need to show you anymore, which is great because this is my 4th class of the day. If you have any question, though, like I said, you should you can ask them here in the chat, right? And I will go over the Telegram group in case I forgot something. Give me 10 more minutes, and we should be done. And by the way, if you're watching the replay and you have questions after that, feel free to post them. Consistency. What does that mean, consistency? Consistency is the frequency with which you can catch something. So some people are able to catch 10 seconds or more, but the stars have to be aligned. For most people, that's not good enough. And understandably, you want to know that you have a handstand. You don't want to feel lucky when you got a handstand. Consistency is one very important goal, if not the most important of them all. Because you know you own your handstand when you can catch it without doubting that you will be able to catch it. On top of consistency, we have 2 other counterparts. We have duration, which is how long you're holding it once you caught it. And you have alignment, which is how does it look? You have to understand that in the way you want to program, again, it's a mindful act, the act of programming your sessions. When I was learning 10 years ago, I was sitting with a friend for breakfast for an hour every month, every 2 months, and we would go over what we had found in our research and we would test things. Now, this took us a lot of time because we tested a lot of poor drills, and back then it was not as prolific as now. So you have much more bad drills out there right now. But we had to stop guessing. It won't come if you guess, right? Consistency, duration, and alignment. You cannot chase in the program you create for yourself. You cannot chase all three. So back to my point, you have to sit with yourself as you being your own coach, which takes time and trials and error. Or you can ask the help of someone like me. Or the in-between is like to try to make your own soup with what you can gather out there, okay? So again, if you're interested, you will find a link. Duration, consistency, alignment. Consistency is the frequency with which you catch something. Duration is how long you catch it. Alignment is how it looks. You cannot chase them all. You have to choose one and zoom on it. And until, in my book, until you get me, you give me 10 seconds, no doubt, in the middle of the room, forget about alignment. Forget about how long even. Bet on consistency. I would anytime, except if you have a very valid reason otherwise, I would anytime choose someone who can hold 5 seconds like this, rather than someone who can hold 15 seconds every 10 reps. I can promise that the former will progress faster than the latter. So consistency is your friend. Consistency is how many times you can crack the code of your handstand, the thing that works for you. What you have to do with your fingers. Look, we all have to do something similar. Don't get me wrong. We all have to abide by the same rules of physics, but we don't have the same bodies. We don't function the same way. We don't process information the same way. We don't feel fear the same way. So we have to be individualized and tailored in the way we cater that. Okay? And so Britt was saying, right, she's coming back to handstands after a year break. It's just like my consistency is all over the shop. And we saw in the videos that this was a product of the alignment being different, right? And I was asking you to look at that and go, can you see then when you're holding it, your body looks a specific way. When you're not holding anything, your body looks completely different. And when you're holding something but you lose it, it's because the wind blew through the branches of your handstand. So we have 3 scenarios. You're catching something for long, you're happy it's a good rep. We want more of that. You're not catching anything. Or you're catching something and you lose it a bit too soon. For the third element here, the drill we did today is the key. Adapt that to your pike handstand. For the successful one, we just want more of it. So kick up. In the good days, you will have a lot of them. Keep going for it. This is your best teacher. But the first one, which is my point right now to finish the slide with, is sometimes we will forget our alignment. We will forget what works for us. And the last thing you want to do is to think that where you left things at last week is where you're going to pick things up from today. If very specific day you find yourself that you're not successfully finding your alignment, the one you took for granted, the one that you could do for weeks or months, you have to put, it's not ego, but it's called ego on the side, and go back to be a bit more of a beginner and find that alignment at the wall again. Use your wall more. I need you to deconstruct. I need you to film, look at, picture it, ingrain in your head the alignment that obviously works for you. For you, Brit, it is the one. For you, improvers, it is the one that you have. It is the shape of your body that you have when you float and freestanding. For you, beginners, it is the one that makes your landing against the wall the most consistent. Your soft landing on the wall, the more consistent. That is the thing that works for you. And then you have to apply that. You have to be able to kick up against that. You have to kick up in that position on demand. If you cannot do that at the wall, no wonder it will happen here. So we have to go back to the wall. We have to not fall in the trap we mentioned before, which is to always do things in the middle of the room. Long story short, that's what we have to do. Okay? Cool. I am just checking if there is any more question. I think. No, I answered all that. Fantastic. I'm sure there's much more we could talk about. Oh yeah, I do have one thing to say. For those of you who are still here, thank you very much. I see that a few of you are live, and I appreciate that. There's an image that came to me earlier when I was teaching a class online. And that is, which a new cycle is starting next week, actually. So if you want to join, you're also welcome. I'll put another link for that. So I have online coaching and online classes. Classes are live. Coaching is you do your own thing in your own time. And when you're ready, you send me your homework. So it depends on your schedule. And that is the mistake we all make is to think that what we managed to do last week, the door that we managed to finally open, is going to stay open, that progress in handstands is linear. And the image that came to me, I think is what's going to speak to you, is it would be the same as if you were signing up to a running club and you would go there every Sunday. And every Sunday you would run, you would expect yourself to run faster than the previous Sunday. Do you see how unsustainable that is? Eventually, it just won't happen this way. And to think even that you will run a bit faster, and then it's going to be the same for X number of weeks, and it's going to go up again, is not realistic. That's not how it works, right? We go faster and then maybe slower because we're tired. And faster, slower, faster. Plateau. I have to break through that plateau. What do I do? What am I doing wrong in my technique? We don't have this expectation in running, because otherwise there would be no limit to how fast we can run. It would just be a matter of training every week. And we add 1 second, or we remove 1 second in the duration that it takes us to go for whatever amount of miles. Same idea. But surprisingly for handstands, we forgot about that. And we're like, sure, it has to be like this, right? I got my first 10 seconds. Beginner. I got my first overshot bail. I got my first kick up in the middle of the room. I got my first second. I got my first 5 seconds. Surely I can do it again. The mental game of handstand is this one. It doesn't happen this way. You're up for a bad surprise. This will happen. This will teach you something about frustration. It's part of this deep practice that handstands are. This is where the teacher is, beyond the physical. But I'm warning you, handstands are like running in that sense. Don't be that bad of a self-coach on yourself. Don't suck the joy out of your practice. Don't be frustrated for no reason. There will be part of it that's frustrating. But right now, you're just setting expectations that are unrealistic. Okay? That makes sense, the second analogy? I hope it does. Look, this is an hour long, as usual. I always set myself 30 minutes, and I always end up waffling for an hour. But I hope this was useful. I will set the links right now in the description. Have an excellent weekend. Check the mini course if you haven't, to absorb all the information and save the videos somewhere if you haven't had the time to go through them. Any question you may have, head to the Telegram group, which will be open for a bit more. And I will see you very soon, hopefully again.